Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arch channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery, and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called The Preacher's Wife. Matt and Carrie met at Baylor University in Waco, Texas in 1994. Just 3 months after they met, in what Carrie's mother, Linda Doolin, called a whirlwind romance, the couple wed at Carrie's childhood home. Both were devout Baptists, and Matt would go on to attend Baylor's George W. Truett Theological Seminary, where he became a Baptist preacher. Soon, the couple had 2 girls, Kenzie and Cassidy. While Matt dedicated his time to the Crossroads Baptist Church in Hewitt, just south of Waco, Carrie raised their daughters. By 1998, the family of 4 was prospering. Carrie was teaching at Spring Valley Elementary School while working as a part-time professor for Tarleton State University when tragedy suddenly struck. Cassidy had been feeling unwell, and it was found that the child, who was just a year old, had a brain tumor. The baby was given treatments and allowed to go home. Unfortunately, when Matt went to check on Cassidy one morning in March of 1999, he found that she had stopped breathing. Carrie took her daughter's death very hard. She sought counseling and studied her Bible as she looked for comfort. Slowly, she turned within herself, and the once bright and outgoing woman now stood quietly in a crowd. Eventually, Carrie started to recover. Even though she would always mourn Cassidy's loss, she found ways to move her life forward, and one of those ways was having another baby, a daughter that they named Grace. On Friday, April 7th, 2006, the family had a normal day, after which the children were put to bed and the adults had some time to unwind. Matt left Carrie around 11:10 p.m. to go rent a movie and to fill his car up with gas. When he returned at midnight, he found Carrie, naked in bed and unresponsive. Quickly, he called 911. He stated that he thought she had taken her own life and was instructed by the operator to perform CPR until EMTs arrived. When they did, they found a clothed Carrie who could not be revived. Through it all, 9-year-old Kenzie and 5-year-old Grace slept in the next room. Police questioned Matt. He stated that it took approximately 45 minutes to run errands, and when he returned, he found the couple's bedroom door locked. After he pried it open with a screwdriver, he found Carrie on the bed unconscious, naked, and unresponsive. When asked why his wife was wearing a t-shirt and underwear if she was supposedly naked, Matt said that he knew she would not want to be seen that way. So, as he talked to the 911 operator and performed CPR, he also dressed her. He had also placed her on the floor, but was able to give investigators a sketch of how she was actually found. The fact that he moved her, clothed her, and performed CPR at the same time while he talked to 911 was all very hard to swallow. He was next asked why he thought his wife would take her own life, to which he responded, it was near the anniversary of Cassidy's death. Matt felt that she had never found closure in the loss. On a dresser in the room, investigators found an empty bottle of Unisom sleeping pills and a typed note with no signature from Carrie. There were no signs of forced entry to the home, and nothing had been stolen. In an unbelievable move, a McLennan County Justice of the Peace was called by telephone to rule on Carrie's death. Without coming to the house or seeing her body, the Justice of the Peace looked at crime scene photos investigators had just taken and ruled that she had indeed taken her own life, and then they closed the case. They didn't even request an autopsy. Carrie's parents, Jim and Linda Doolin, couldn't accept the fact that their daughter, who they said was a good preacher's wife, had taken her own life. But with the evidence at hand and the note and the ruling that followed soon after, they didn't have much of a choice. Because Matt insisted that Carrie's funeral be held on that following Monday, they didn't even have a chance to try to get an independent autopsy performed. Almost 2 weeks after the funeral, the Doolin family started to hear some nasty rumors. At a meeting with her 3 sisters, Linda was told that Matt was known to flirt with women in his congregation. Before her death, Carrie's parents had added her to their phone plan to save money. This gave them access to her call history. In it, they found that Matt was still making calls to Carrie's cell phone. Since her death, he had made about 180 calls. When he was asked about this, Matt stated that he had given Carrie's phone to a woman named Vanessa Bowles, who was a member of his congregation. He said that he did talk to her a lot, but that he talked to all of his friends a lot. He claimed that he had a strong friendship with the young woman and nothing more. When Bowles was questioned, she also claimed that they were only friends. Carrie's therapist said that Carrie thought Matt was having an affair and might even harm her. Carrie's fears seemed to be confirmed when she found crushed up pills in Matt's briefcase. Carrie relayed to her therapist, quote, "He told me that clearly some youth had found his briefcase and spit the pills in there so that they wouldn't have to take them, and that he reported this to security at the youth center where Matt worked." When she talked to the youth center, they showed that no report had been made. The Doolin family decided that they would employ the services of former Assistant District Attorney and Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Johnston to investigate their ex-son-in-law. He in turn hired former Deputy U.S. Marshal Mike McNamara and former Department of Safety undercover agent John Bennett to round out an experienced team. Their investigation showed that Matt spent a lot of time online. His searches included pornographic websites where the sleeping pill Ambien could be bought and was actually put into a cart but never purchased, and also searches for, quote, overdose by sleeping pill. The piece of evidence that really tipped the case towards an arrest was crime scene photos. Lividity or blood pooling in her arms showed that they had not been stretched out flat on the bed as Matt's diagram showed. They actually showed that her left arm had been hanging off the bed for some time before 911 was called, contradicting her husband's timeline. In July of 2006, based on the investigative team's findings, the Doolins decided to file a wrongful death lawsuit against Matt. This triggered a chain of events. First, the Justice of the Peace, who ruled on Carrie's death originally, reopened his ruling. Her body was exhumed. But due to the embalming process and the years since her death, her muscles were the only thing that could be tested. They showed traces of alcohol, Ambien, and Unisom. The test gave them no timeline or amount for their use. It only showed that those things were present. Her stomach was also checked, but there was no pills found. A toxicologist hired by the family's investigative team said he believed that Carrie hadn't died of an overdose. If that was her cause of death and her husband was only gone for 45 minutes, there should still be pills in her stomach. In August of 2007, her death was ruled undetermined. Within months, Matt was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. Unfortunately, no one could definitively prove that her death was a homicide, and there was no physical evidence connecting him to the murder. The charges were eventually dropped. Investigators had more work to do, and they decided to go back and talk to Vanessa Bowles. Throughout her questioning, Bowles denied that she had a relationship with Baker. When they threatened to pull her into court to testify under oath, she countered and said that she would plead the fifth. They then decided to offer her immunity for any potential involvement in Carrie's murder. On September 2nd, she gave investigators all of the horrifying details. She claimed that the two had been having an affair since the end of 2005. Baker constantly talked about how horrible his marriage was. He said that Carrie was hideous and that if he and Bowles ever fell deeply in love, that Baker would find a way out of his marriage. He played with the idea of tampering with the brakes on her car, as well as killing her in a drive-by shooting. Then he settled on making it look as though she had taken her own life. 2 weeks before her death, he made his first attempt on her life by giving her a milkshake laced with medication. Carrie said it tasted funny and she wouldn't drink it. This account was backed up by an email that Baker sent to Bowles on his work account that said that he would make a better drink and this time cover it with lots of chocolate. On the 7th, he asked Carrie to have a date night at home with him. After their children were asleep, Baker gave Carrie what she thought were sexual stimulants along with some wine coolers. The stimulants were actually capsules that he had filled with Ambien. He took her to the bedroom, where he handcuffed her to the bed, and she soon fell asleep. Then, according to Bulls, he kissed her forehead and told her to give Cassidy a kiss for him before he put a pillow over her face and smothered her. After taking off the handcuffs, he typed a note on the family's computer, rubbed Carrie's hands on it to ensure that her prints were there, and then placed it on the dresser with the empty bottle of Unisom. He then left, locking the bedroom door as he went, and completed his errands. All the while, his daughters slept in the next room, beside their dead mother. Baker would be arrested a second time in March of 2009 and charged again with his wife's murder. In January of 2010, a jury convicted him of the first-degree murder of his wife Carrie and sentenced him to 65 years in prison. Baker still proclaims his innocence. The Doolin family now faced another uphill battle as they tried to win custody of Grace and Kinsey back from Baker's parents. A year and a half later, they did just that and have taken on the task of trying to help the girls understand what happened to their mother. Jim Doolin believes that hard work is paying off. Quote, "I live with 3 women, and the other night, they were all laughing and giggling and just having a grand old time. That was a symphony," he said, as tears formed in his eyes. Linda spoke of how she still gets to see Carrie. Quote, "I see her every day in her daughters." Case cracked. I would like to thank CBSNews.com, TDCAA.com, NBCNews.com, ABCNews.go, Texas Monthly, and OakCrestWaco.com. Of course, the biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case. And here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, this case seems to get way off track very, very early on. And the note had such problems, like considering it's printed, there's no signature on it. I mean, was it written very well? It must have sounded like it came directly from her.
Well, here's what the note said. This will give you some idea. Matt, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. I just want to sleep for a while. Please forgive me. Tell Kinsey and Grace that I love them very much. Tell my mom and dad that I love them too. I love you, Matt. I'm so sorry for the past few weeks. I want to give Cassidy a hug. I need to feel her again. Please continue to be the great dad to our little girls. Love them every day for me. I am sorry. I love you. Carrie.
I mean, not that there's any clear indicators in that. If I would have come across that note written that way and it was handwritten, like that would be one
That's,
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But obviously being printed, like I'm pretty sure I'd be curious about, okay, when was this printed? I mean, maybe it's just because I'm a former IT guy, but the first thing I'd be like, okay, show me the computer so I could figure out when was this file saved? When was this done? Let me check the logs in Windows, see when this thing spun up. When, like,
Well,
it
I
would have
mean,
been,
there's so many
yeah,
things.
it's so traceable to think that, oh, someone sat down at a computer and wrote this up and then printed it out.
Well,
Um,
lucky for Matt, the police didn't do any of those things.
yeah, yeah,
None of them.
exactly.
They didn't take the computer. They didn't check it. They didn't do anything.
Yeah. Lucky for Matt, but unlucky for her family, which is
Yeah,
terrible.
very.
And then, of course, the rush to have her buried. And of course, we've talked about other cases where, that severely affects the autopsy because of the embalming process. And even here, we're able to learn that, yeah, there was those drugs in her system, but we don't know the amount. And when you don't know the amount, you can't be like, okay, this is a clear overdose situation because this amount. And even to the point of, we didn't find any pills in her stomach. I think that argument's better supported when you have a crazy amount that you can point to and say, hey, look, this is 30 pills worth and there was no pills in her stomach. So this had to be given to her a different way. Thankfully,
Right.
it sounds like that argument still worked, but yeah.
Well, and they had something unusual happen at the funeral. Carrie's counselor was there,
Mhm.
and she said that Matt did not appear to be behaving in a manner consistent with a grieving person. And he specifically asked her if Carrie had said anything about him trying to kill her. Now, of
At her
course,
funeral?
at her funeral,
Wow. Wow.
and we know that Carrie did have some conversation with the counselor about that. So, I mean, it just looks that much more suspicious.
It does. And I want to be fair to this conversation because I did see in some of the source material that Carrie was even kind of wavering a little bit on it, but she was talking to her therapist saying, "Hey, I'm kind of worried about this, that he might be trying," but he wouldn't do that, right? Like that's kind of the tone that I got based off the stuff that I saw. But still, to have that as a warning indicator, to be at her funeral and her husband is asking you that, like that is all red flag, red flag. Like that's wow.
It is. And to make matters worse, 2 weeks later, their daughter had a birthday party. The people who came to the house noticed that all the photos of her mother had been removed and they'd been replaced with pictures of Vanessa Bowles and the children.
Wow.
That puts a level of anger in me that I just can't even express.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then how
Mm-mm.
could they deny that she was involved with this guy? Does he have
It was,
pictures of other people from the congregation all over his house? I mean,
well, he should because he was such good friends with everybody, right?
right, right.
I
Wow,
mean, come on.
wow. Well, the other thing, I mean, it seems like I keep getting caught on this because we have this conversation time and time again where it seems like people start living in a fantasy world about what's going to happen and how things are going to go. But the biggest sign of that with this case in particular is him giving the cell phone. You're giving a cell phone that your deceased wife's parents are paying for, and you
Mm-hmm.
think that no one's going to think to look at those records and say, "Oh wow, the cell phone's still being used." Like it's what is
Well,
going
and
on with this guy?
well, to make matters worse here, it's horrible enough that he's given the cell phone away. But he tries to tell them, oh, I talk to all my friends a lot. Well, they didn't notice 130 phone calls to anybody else on there.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, it's ridiculous to think that, lie, lie, lie will just get you through.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had some pretty bizarre instances in my family around deaths. I had one family member that got remarried like very, very soon after their wife died. And he and his new wife came to a big event I was having, and his new wife was wearing his old wife's jewelry.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's already like someone needs to write a book and just get the word out there, like things to not do.
Obvious red flags.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. Well, Christy, thank you so much for all your work on this. We really appreciate you. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Jennifer Wilson and Mr. S. Carney. For over 6 years, we've always run limited commercial ads here on YouTube, and we can't do that without your support. If you'd like to help the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There, you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even buy us a coffee like PK recently did. We know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is important to understand the many unsolved cases we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below if you want to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. I'll be back this Wednesday with an important case update right here on the Lord and Arts channel.